Cookie acquisition is in progress. That will be completed shortly. I have to get mine too. Even though I've already had speaker cookies, I will still eat program cookies. What are these? Oh, I'll bet they're these are the lemony ones? Okay. So, oh yeah, I've had these. These are good.
Oh, I think that's a banana.
Yeah. I forgot about these. These are good.
And the like ones with the chocolate chips, like gathered up, are they like peanut butter?
Mm.
Yeah, they smell like okay. So I don't want no.
I'm a cookie company pro now.
You allergic to peanuts?
No, I just really don't like it.
Oh.
So it's okay. I can name it.
Oh, there's one in there, macadamia nuts. That's the only nuts. And then
Oh.
there's the peanut butter chocolate chip.
Gotcha.
Sorry, I didn't know people.
Did you guys see there's some new study out that if you expose your kids to peanuts in the first year of life, like it drastically reduces their chance? So basically all the people that are scared of peanut allergies are the ones giving their kids peanut allergies, essentially.
Same thing with dogs and cats.
Yes. Actually,
I'm
my
allergic to nothing. I love it.
yeah. And if you just raise your kid in filth for the first year or two, nothing will. If that doesn't kill them, nothing will.
He'd roll in this like bath of dirty tissues.
Yeah.
It is.
It looked his
Same thing happens with C-sections.
Mm.
They don't get the nasty crap.
Yeah, you don't get
They're less healthy.
smeared with all the stuff on the way out.
It's too sterile.
Mm. That would explain why I'm so sickly. Me and Julius Caesar.
Julius Caesar's dead, but I'm not sure.
Well, it's because of that C-section. He'd still be alive today if he hadn't been delivered by C-section.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I did actually. When my brother had a kid, I got them like a sheepskin rug from IKEA, and I'm like, put your kid on this in his little crib, and he'll be fine. He won't have any pet allergies. All right, or asthma or whatever it was that was saying. All right, so let's pause and touch base a little bit because I know we've been a little bit all over the map the last couple weeks. And, I want to make sure everybody's, we've, I think, gotten derailed in some discussions in mostly a good way from, people having good questions about how stuff actually works. Which actually I do think is more important than, going fast, because I think I'd rather have people kind of firmly understand, the basics so that you can kind of learn more on your own than, try to whiz through concepts and come up with a not firm understanding. But I want to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page. So if I can recall correctly, because we kind of skipped all around from my initial lesson plan, we had covered, basic things like what a variable is, how to make a variable, how to update a variable, do some basic math operations, and save the output. We have done for loops and while loops. Talked a little bit about what those are and how they work, and we've now done if and else type statements, and I think that's the major kind of conceptual things. We've talked about differences in variable types, like true false, aka Boolean, versus integer versus floating point versus string. We talked a little bit about that modulo operator, which is a not operator many of us may not have been familiar with before. Is there anything that people are having problems with, that people want to talk about, people are curious about, anything that people are wanting to check in on before we kind of go in a new direction?
This is the incorrect syntax, correct?
Incorrect, correct?
This is the, because we had a working solution and then we screwed it all up, right? So let's see, prime finder, we did change it. Let's see. Well, it goes from 2 to candidate prime. Oh, right. So let's let's quickly change this back to be. Now wait, I'm confused. I think it actually is right. Let's run and see.
I think it's the syntax that has everything not being done.
Yeah, this one looks like the working one. I think So, okay. So yeah, if we think back, because what we were trying to do was design an algorithm to decide if numbers were prime or not prime, right? So what we had said would work is the strategy of assuming primeness when you start checking a number and then going up through all the numbers that could be its factors. And when you get to one that is a factor of it, you assign it to be false, right? You say, okay, this is not prime. And then there's never a chance for it to get set to be prime again, right? So like the sort of common error with this kind of thing that I think a lot of people make is they will say something like, here they'll say like, if this thing is a factor, set is prime to false, otherwise set it to true, right? But what we said was like, well, every time through the loop, every time you don't find a factor, you set it back to prime again, which is not what you want, right? Like once you get, once you become non-prime, you can't become prime again, right? You're tainted, forever tainted by that factor. So what we're doing here makes sense to people? Was this code parse in your brain? Is this vaguely?
Yeah, one has like an error, but I don't know if you want to spend less time on it because his, like, I'm looking at his syntax and your syntax. I
Looks
can't
the
see
same.
a difference. And,
I think I get a quick look. What's the error saying?
There's no error, it's just all of them are not prime.
Oh, I know what I see it. You're missing a line of code. Oh wait, no, you're not. Is it saved? Whatever have you saved the most recent version?
Mm-hmm.
can you show the numbers so like.
Oh yeah, sorry. PyCharm always clearing my. Well, yeah. So let's debug yours later because I think we can get off of this example. You got 12 lines.
He has extra spaces, so.
And I've got one line commented out, which you may not have in there. Anyway, yeah, so did you have a question or is that just hand motion? Okay. So let's move on to a different example. Let's kind of, I think, start with a simpler algorithm and just kind of like see if we can reconstruct what we learned, right? And I think next time, so I brought up the paper, but I think next time we meet, we'll use the paper again because we haven't done the exercise yet, really, where I give you some code and ask you to work it out on paper. And I think that will be really instructive to seeing kind of how you guys are holding up with this stuff. But I think let's maybe revert to a simpler example just to see if we're all on the same page. Because really, so just to kind of frame this, you guys have all, these are like they're not all the main constructs of programming, but they are many of these main constructs. So you can do a lot of things with just the tools that we have done so far in the proper combination. Now what we haven't done a whole lot of is, I mean, we have done a little bit of nesting, not a ton, right? So when we say nesting, that means like a loop within a loop, for example, right? So one key thing, right, is that in real life, right, your programs are really heavily nested, right? Like there are loops within loops within loops within loops within loops, right? And if else's within if else's within if else's within if else's. So really kind of the complexity of programs that you would use in real life kind of come from the encapsulation of some of these chunks of code and other chunks of code, right? And one other way to do that encapsulation more efficiently is with functions, which you haven't really talked about, but we will probably not get to that this time. Maybe next time. Okay. So let's go back to this is if you ever interview for a tech job, this is a very common thing people will do to assess whether you just basically know the language that they're asking you to work in. Has anyone ever heard the FizzBuzz demo? So you had. This is related to Project Euler problem number 1 also.
Yeah, this is exactly the same thing.
Basically, except you save and add them up, right?
Yeah.
So FizzBuzz, the idea is, let's see, what is it? You replace, so you have numbers that you're counting up from like 1 to whatever, 50, say. And the idea is that every time you come to a multiple of 3, instead of that number, you say fizz. And every time you come to a multiple of 5, you say buzz. And then if every time you come to a multiple of 3 or 5, you say fizzbuzz. Okay?
3 and 5.
So what did I say? 3 and 5. Sorry, not 3 or 5. That's the difference between and or, right? Oh yeah, which we've also talked about a little bit, right? Ands and ors and that kind of thing. Okay, so first of all, this is a good like group activity. Let's practice counting, shall we? From say 1 to 20 or something all together. So if it's a multiple of 3, you say fizz instead of the number. If it's a multiple of 5, you say buzz instead of the number. If it's a multiple of both, you say fizz buzz. Actually, let's go to like 35, say. All right? Let's all play together. Make sure we have the algorithm in mind. 1, 2, fizz, 4, buzz, fizz, 7, 8, fizz, buzz, 11, fizz, wait, 13, 14, fizz, buzz, 16, 17, fizz, 18, buzz. Oh wait, sorry, yeah, no, fizz, you're right. So wait, what did I screwed it up.
17 fizz.
17 fizz, 19 buzz, fizz, 22, 23 fizz, buzz, 26 fizz, 28, 29 fizz buzz. All right, let's just stop at the second fizz buzz. All right, does that make sense to people roughly?
Yeah.
All right, so now I'm going to test you guys to see. So let's do that just with a little Python script. This should not take too many lines of code. And I think I'm going to make you guys tell me most of what to do here. So if we want to do fizzbuzz up to say 30 or 35 or whatever, it doesn't really matter the number, how would we start to write, or what are we going to need to do that?
We can find the range that we're going to be testing everything.
Okay, yep, so we're going to definitely have a range. So let's say like, I'm going to just set a variable up at the top of my script that says something like go up to, let's say 50. That'll just define where we get up to, obviously. So in the broader sense, before I guess we get to the details, what kind of basic structure is the script going to have? Like, what kind of programming constructs, like loops and ifs and that kind of thing? Like, what is our basic kind of structure for our program going to be to make this happen?
We'll have 3 loops. That's probably the more efficient way to do it. I see like loops efficient ways. Like if you go through 3 loops, well, maybe you just need 1, and you can do if, or like if you can do 1 if loop statement and do like if it's this or it's that or it's this, then do this.
Yeah, because I think one way that you might think of initially doing this is saying like, all right, well first we loop through all the multiples of 3 somehow, and then we loop through all the multiples of 5 or whatever. But that will do like 3 kind of separate lists or whatever, right? Which is not what we want. What we want is, yeah, like for each number to go through like 1, 2, fizz, 4, buzz, etc., right? So we really just need 1 for loop, right? So 1 big for loop that goes from 1 up to 50, I guess, in this case. Okay. And what do we do inside that for loop? What are we going to have?
You could do, that's the you just use the module. So if it's divisible by 3, and that is equal to 0, then this. If it's equal to 0 and divisible by 5, then that, and so forth.
Okay, so right. So for each number in the loop, basically we want to check and see if it's a multiple of 3, or if it's a multiple of 5, or both. If so, print fizz or buzz or fizz buzz. Otherwise, print the number out, right? So, all right, so that's the basic structure, right? So some kind of for loop going up to 50, inside some if-else's, checking to see if it's a multiple of 3, 5, or both, and printing accordingly. All right, so tell me what to write in my first line of code here.
For x in range 1 to 1.
1, 2, okay. 51, right? So because I sort of defined, let's say I wanted to make this program flexible and make it go to different ranges, I'm going to use that variable. So, but you're right. So it should be 51. So I can do go up to +1, right? Everybody clear so far? Oh, and I need I'll do my colon there. Okay. So if we're going to call our counter x, x is going to go from 1. Actually, let's see. Well, Yeah, that's right. That's right. I had to think about that for a second. Getting Python versus MATLAB confusion in my head. Right, because if we do, if we bring up our Python console again, range 151 should give us all the numbers from 1 up to 50, right? So if we go for x in range 1 up to 51, x will be 1 through 50. All right. So what do we write next? What's the next word I write in the next line of code?
If if x modulo 3 equals 0.
Okay, so that's when we can. Let's all we can do this all collectively. Although, all right. So if x modulo 3 equals 0, do what? Somebody else. Okay.
Is it okay to put the x modulo 3 in parentheses? I like math to be in parentheses.
Oh yeah, I mean that's fine. Yep, I was just typing as people were talking, but yes, we can do that. And that is probably, like, it is true that the modulo will get evaluated like in the PEMDAS fashion before the equality test, but it's true. I also like to put stuff in parentheses just to make that super clear what's getting tested against what. Okay, so that is something we can do. Then what can I write after this? So who said elif? Was that, okay, right. So this is actually something I don't think we've done yet in this class, which is, well, okay, let's write it this way. So this is often called else if in other languages, but for some reason Python abbreviates to elif. So that means if the first condition, modulo x3 equals 0, if that's not true, but if something else is true. So I might say, like, if it's Monday, go to the cabin talk. Else if it's Tuesday, go to, the class after lecture. Else if Wednesday, sleep in. Because that's my day off.
Well, doesn't it make sense if we're doing LF? Doesn't it make sense to do the 3 and 5 condition first? Because then it'll stop at there at 3, and it will go to it will be just fizz and not fizz buzz.
Okay, I was hoping somebody did not catch that, but that's all right. So let's leave this little minor thing in here because we're all on the right track. But let's leave this little minor thing in here for illustrative purpose. So you might think to say, if x modulo 5 equals 0, print buzz. Just to finish it off, so this is not going to be exactly right, but let's finish the not exactly right version off and then fix it. So what else could we do? So what could we write after this? Else print what? Or x,
X.
yeah, that's all right. Sometimes we use I, sometimes we use x, sometimes we could call it whatever, but yes, print x. All right. So yeah, and let's actually go up to maybe like 20, so it's not like overwhelming. All right, so let's run this and see what it does.
It's telling you to put a colon.
Oh yeah, thanks. MATLAB does not have colons. Most other languages don't have colons, so Python always gets me on the colons. Okay. Oops, why? Oh, you know what I did? This is just a weird, I don't know what. PyCharm I find very weird. It's good for illustrative purposes, but I've never run this in real life. Okay, so let's see how close we came. 1, 2, 3, fizz, 4. And actually, this is a good example. We're gonna have to, again, we've already anticipated what needs to happen with this. But, you often get cases like this where you have to kind of debug based on some output that you can't introspect into necessarily. So 1, 2, fizz, 4, buzz, fizz, 7, 8. So that looks 1, 2, fizz, 4, buzz, fizz, 7, 8, fizz, buzz, 11, fizz, 13, 14. All right. So 15 is that case that we talked about where it looks like it's working up to that point. But instead of fizz buzz at 15, it just says fizz, right? And whoever caught that, what was the issue there?
It just stopped at where with the method condition instead of again divisible by 3 and stopping there.
Right, because we say if x is divisible by 3, we print fizz. Else, if it's divisible by 5, print buzz. Which means, like, if it has already been divisible by 3, sorry, did I say equal to? If it has already been divisible by 3, it doesn't check to see if it's divisible by 5, right? So that's the difference between just a straight if and an else if, right? So what we actually want to do is not exclude the possibility that you could also print buzz if you have already printed fizz, right?
Another if underneath the first if statement.
Mm-hmm.
If we put,
So-
no, I mean leave that, but then within the first if.
I see what you're doing.
Under put another.
I see. So yeah, we can do this a few different ways.
Next
Divisible by 3.
Yep, I see what you're saying. So under the print,
Yeah.
like here.
Or say if it's divisible by 5.
Okay, that is well. Let's see.
So you have to put that above the fizz.
So like that. Is that what you're saying, Dana? What? So let's try this. Well, let's see. So we don't let that actually run. Okay. 1, 2, fizz. 4, buzz. Fizz, 7, 8, fizz, buzz. 11, fizz. 13, 14, fizz, buzz. 16, 17. Okay. What's that? Well, it's printing in a different. Yes, I was going to say, like, ideally, if this were a true FizzBuzz task, you would have it print FizzBuzz like together on the same line. So, all right, but this basically works. Now it's a little redundant because we have to test to see if it's equal to 5, or I mean divisible by 5. Sorry, twice, but that's okay. So how could we fix the? Let's fix the 2 lines problem first. Sorry, I have this ear infection on my deaf and my left ear, so everyone has to speak up a little bit. What are you saying?
So move the print phase hold on. And the you can add one more. And then
Sorry, move it where? I missed the bit. Like, all right. Say again. You're probably right. I'm just having a hard time hearing everyone today. So let's.
move the print phase
So you want to print face down to where the print was.
Okay, so wait. All right, I'm hearing a lot of different ideas. So print fizz move down to where exactly?
So if you remove the print fizz from where it's at and you have the if statement, and then on that if statement is divisible by 5, you can put fizz buzz there, and then do an else print fizz.
Ah, okay, I see. Is that what that might have been what you were saying too, right? Yeah, so you could do it this way.
Can you add string variables?
In a way, yeah.
Or is that not ideal?
Let's do this first. So this is what everyone was saying, I think. So like that. Get rid of the extra line. Let's try. Okay, we've got 1, 2, fizz, 4, buzz, fizz, 7, 8, fizz, buzz, 11, fizz, 13, 14, fizz, buzz, 16, 17, fizz, 19, buzz. That looks right. Yay, it works.
You got the job, I guess.
Yay, well, yeah. So that's pretty good. Now, it's a little redundant in a way, right? Because one of the weird things about the FizzBuzz task is how to
One
say this.
discussion because it's kind of the redundant. If the kind of redundant. The second if loop within the if loop, or the if loop within the if loop, but we kind of redundant with the else if.
Yeah. I mean, if we wanted to save lines of code, which doesn't matter that much, but if we wanted to save lines, so let's do like FizzBuzz 2. Can we think of ways of making FizzBuzz more efficient than it is right now? Like in terms of, not necessarily computationally efficient, because that's probably like not an issue with FizzBuzz, but
So if you start
But
with
fewer lines of code that are kind of like less conceptually redundant.
So if you start with and, this is the use one and.
We talked about ors and ands last time, yeah. So we can test to see if something and something else is true. So what were we going to say?
If we start with modulo 3 and modulo 5.
Then do what?
Then
FizzBuzz.
FizzBuzz.
Okay. So if x modulo 3 equals 0, what is it in Python? It's the word and, right? X modulo 5. Oh, do you have the double ampersand from?
No, I did x modulo 3 and x modulo 5 equal.
Ah, right. So, that is a super common, right. So that's something, by the way, that you have to like unlearn. And that's a good like side note. Not that we need more side notes. Aside. Too many asides. If this is something that people like say in language all the time. So like if we say something like if A and B are both even, right? Like, or if A and B are both 2. It would be very tempting. So if I say like A equals 3 and B equals 2 or something like that, I want to do something if they're both equal to 2. Like it would be very tempting to say if A and B 2, right? So, oh, that's weird.
Yeah,
Let's see if, wait a minute. Oh, let's try this. I'm not going on this.
True and false is true, right?
Wait a minute. A and B.
So that's looking at it as A and B is
Actually, I'm not even-
string, right?
What if, these
Isn't
are
it-
different too, what happens between B?
What's that?
Isn't it treating A and B as a string?
I actually have no idea what it's doing there, to be honest. I thought it was doing what I had taught you about, Rafi, the like bitwise math. Don't worry about that, everyone else. But that is not at all. I have no idea what it's actually doing. But it's not doing what we think, right? Like in that weird way, somehow A and B, when A,
Essentially, the and just checks if the thing before the and and the thing after the and, like equates them separately.
Huh.
Because if you do 4, then 3 equals
Oh, weird. Wait. What?
Yeah, this is
So it's always shooting second.
It looks like what it's doing is if they're both a non-zero value, it's returning the second one. I don't know. That's a weird thing to do. But anyway, it's not what we thought, right? Because what we really wanted to do is something like if A equals 2 and B equals 2, right? So in like casual English, you can kind of say, or an even better way to do it is with an or, right? Because or is maybe more commonly expressed this way, right? Like if you say like, if either A or B is equal to 2, like that was how you might say that in English, right? But you can't do that in programming, right? Like you can only or together true false values or and put together true false values with ands or ors, right? So you have to explicitly say if A equals 2 or B equals 2. You can't say if, I mean, you can say it, but it won't come up with anything that's meaningful. If A or B equals 2, right? Does everybody see the difference between those things? So this is wrong, other one right. Right? Because if you use ands and ors, you want to compare two conditions, not two values, right? Two numbers. Okay, right. So up here we have to say if x modulo 3 equals 0 and a separate statement, x modulo 5 equals 0. Okay, print fizz buzz. Okay, that's our leftover stuff down here.
So can you explain ellipse again?
Right. So ellipse do. So ellipse. So if I say to you, let's see. So trying to think of a good human example. So you could say all right, if I'm in the car, I'll go via this. Say you're taking your car versus your bike versus walking, right? You could say so you could say something like if you know that you would only drive versus walk, and so you don't own a bicycle, you could say if I'm taking the car, take this route. Otherwise, take this route, right? And the otherwise case kind of covers all all right, if I'm driving on the car, take the interstate. Otherwise, take the street, regular streets, right? And that actually covers all non-car cases pretty well, right? Because on a bike, you wouldn't take the interstate either, etc., right? But if you if there was a highway versus a bike path versus the regular road, right? You wouldn't. So one way you could say this, and you actually could say, if I'm in the car, take the highway. If I'm in the bike, take the bike path. Or if I'm on the bike, take the bike path. If I'm walking, take the regular sidewalks. So you don't really need an elif there. But let's change this to let's say you have a bike rack on your car or something like that, right? And you change these to if I have my whatever. If I have my car, do this. If I have my bike, do this. If I don't have either, do this. But, so in that case, let's say you were phrasing it that way. You'd say if I have my car, take the highway. If I have my bike, get on the bike path. If I don't have either, walk, right? Or take the sidewalk. But you may want to but in that case, if you have a bike rack on your car, you can have your car and your bike at the same time, right? And you would try to do both of those things, in other words, right? Or
So in this case,
so what you want to do is make them mutually exclusive, in other words, right? So you want to say if I'm in the car, do the highway thing. Else if I'm in the bike. So the difference there is that only gets considered if the first thing wasn't already true, right? So
can you do two elifs?
you can do as many elifs as you want, actually.
But,
Yeah.
But so here, I'll have elif modulo 5 equals 0 from buzz, elif modulo 3. But when it gets to that second elif, is it only comparing?
Well, let's write it out and sort of think about it. So you want to do the elif modulo 3 fizz next. So you want to say elif x modulo 3 equals 0, print fizz.
Yeah, and then the same thing.
elif x modulo 5 equals 0, print buzz, else print x. All right, clearly people wanted that to be I really badly. That's all right. All right, so that.
Right. So that second elif, is it saying if that first if statement is not true and the second elif statement is not then check the modulo 5.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you want to think of this in, I mean, I should come up with some better like real world examples for this. Yeah, like it's. I mean, there's plenty of them in real life.
I
So
just didn't know if it only was
No, it
For
does
the-
on that over.
I-
The one that you.
So, all right, here's a better example. Let's say like,
I just didn't know the hierarchy. I understand the LF, I just didn't know how far it
yeah.
compared with the condition.
So you could say something like this, right? You could say like, if I have a meeting at 11:30, have lunch with my 11:30 person. If I have a meeting at 12:30, have lunch with my 12:30 person. If I have a meeting, or if I don't have 11:30 or 12:30 meetings, like eat lunch alone at my desk or whatever. Sadly. Right. But what you don't want to do in that case, right, is you don't want to eat two lunch. I mean, I want to eat two lunches, but most people would not normally want to eat two lunches, right? So what you really want to say is, if I'm meeting 11:30, have lunch with 11:30 person. Else, if I didn't have lunch at 11:30, but I do have a meeting at 12:30, have lunch with 12:30 person, right? But we don't consider that possibility if we already had lunch at 11:30. Then like we're all done, right? You know, then you could go on. You could say like, else if I have a meeting at 1:30, you know, have lunch with 1:30 person. Else, eat lunch by myself at 1:30 or whatever, right? Does that kind of make sense? So in other words, like, you only want to entertain each possibility if the previous one has failed to be executed or failed to be true, right?
So you have to prioritize them. Like you put them in the order that you
Right.
want to check.
Yes. So this is getting back to like, yeah, don't think about this like a person. Have like the empathy for the machine where you have to think like, it's going to read these through sequentially, right? So in other words, like, if you want to check, you know, if you, now if we're doing this for meetings, right? Like let's say, all right, let's say I have meetings at 11:30, 12:30, and 1:30. And one of them could be a lunch meeting. Like I could say, probably the best time to have lunch is 12:30 of those three options, maybe in theory, right? So if that was the case, I'd have to say like if meeting at 12:30, have lunch with 12:30 person, right? Like, you know what I mean? We have to consider these options. Else if, then maybe my second choice is 1:30. Like else if I have a meeting at 1:30, have lunch with 1:30 person. Else if meeting at 11:30, have a meeting with 11:30 person.
I mean, this
Otherwise-
is a good example as well, because if you put the print fizz buzz after you did the fizz and the buzz, it would never print fizz buzz.
Right.
Because it will just divide
Right.
divisible by 3
Right.
and then move on to the next one.
And so you would never, so in a case where your hierarchy, like you need to have two statements, LS wouldn't be useful because, like here it works because you're getting sequentially more specific, right? But if at any point in the cycle you needed to revert back to like a previous level, the LS wouldn't let you do that. Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean, yeah, you can't go back up.
Like after I've checked for fizz buzz and I've checked for fizz, right? Then I'm doing buzz. But if I had a fourth thing that I wanted to check, unrelated to fizz or buzz, I would not be able to put that.
Oh yeah, so if you want to check some totally different thing, like if x is divisible by 4, or if it's Tuesday or something like that, if it had already done one of those things,
Right.
it wouldn't do that. So it's only going to do, yeah. When you, basically the idea is if you have an if, elephant, else kind of thing, you can have as many if, well, you can have one if and one else, and then as many elifs as you want. But they're always mutually exclusive options is the way it goes, right? At least at the same level. Now I can nest another set of ifs and elses within one of these, right? Like testing some totally different set of stuff. Like you can always nest stuff within other stuff, right? So I could say like, all right, now that I'm committed to a 12:30 lunch meeting, like if any of these other possibilities, like if it's a short meeting, like go somewhere close. If it's a long meeting, go, you know, somewhere far. If the university's paying for it, go somewhere fancy. If I'm paying for it, go somewhere cheap. You know, like you can have all these other ifs and elses within like one of those consequences. But at any like parallel level where all the ifs and elifs are on the same level of indentation, you can have as many as you like, but only one of those options is going to get executed. Either we print fizzbuzz, or we print fizz, or we print buzz. Or all else failing, we just print the number. right? So yeah, only one of those things could ever get done, and they are checked in the order that they occur in the code. Yeah. So first the if, then the first else, then the second else, then the else.
I have a quick question. You don't have to like answer it fully. So probably I don't know what much of my time answering it, but just say I want to do like a nested loop for each of those. Can you do macros within Python so you can like simplify the syntax? Or do you have to like literally type out the same thing like 3 times?
Would you like off another script?
Well, so yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like just printing like the common constructs like double equals 0 or something like that, there's not a much faster way to like.
Yeah, I'm thinking if you have like a convoluted, like if you wanted to nest something and then like
Well,
it was a lot of syntax or something.
so this is one of the tenets of programming, I think, which is that if you find yourself copying and pasting identical code a lot, there's probably a better way to do it, right? So now we haven't talked about functions, but like one thing when we talk about functions, basically you like take a chunk of code and give it a name, and it becomes a function. So like if I have a whole, you know, like if we go back to the prime number example, right? Like if I have a program that needs to find prime numbers a bunch of times, I don't need to copy and paste that prime number code every time, right? I can put all of that into a function called like give me a bunch of prime numbers, and like just call that one line of code that represents a whole chunk of code. Now we haven't talked about doing that, but that's the idea.
Yeah.
Or like put it in a separate module that kind of like does its own thing. But the other thing is, if it's just in a little, you know, area, like if it's not a complex thing, but you still find yourself copying and pasting, that probably means that there's a way to simplify your code. Because yeah, generally you do try to avoid like, well, I mean, there's no way to avoid like some redundancy. Like you'll find yourself saying double equals 0 a lot because like that's a common thing to test something is equal to 0. And if you have like super common like kind of code phrases you tend to use, you can like set up a text expanding kind of macro shortcut thing. But yeah, if you find the actual code is redundant, probably means that you could do it better. So let's, with the timer running, first of all, let's test this FizzBuzz, because I actually have to go slightly before 3 because I have a meeting at 3. So this will work, FizzBuzz. Let's do, so let's FizzBuzz 1. FizzBuzz 1. So let's do, we're FizzBuzz 3. I'm going to abstract away from some of the complexity so that we can get to it before we got to go. Let's think of an example that is even slightly more efficient. Oh, actually, sorry. I think we already almost had this, right? So what did we have in our very initial version, which I didn't say clearly because how do we have it where Fizz and Buzz were on separate lines? Well, this is what this one did, right? Yeah, so I didn't say that was this one, right? Yeah, so we can get even. So what I'm going to do is one that still will print Fizz and Buzz on different lines, but will be shorter than either of these. So let's do it, I think. Well, it may not be shorter, but it will be more compact. Well,
Yeah, I can't think of the easier way to do it.
let me see something here. Oops, yeah, too loud. This is where I'm trying to, okay, yeah, so you can add strings together.
Alright.
So we can assign variables to Fizz and Buzz and then just add the variables or something.
Well, so you could do something like this. This is something to think about, various ways of implementing this. The way I was thinking of doing it may not work that well actually in Python, but you could say something like, make a variable called what to print. And you can actually make that an empty string. So you could say something like, if x modulo 3 equals 0, to print equals to print plus is if x modulo 5 equals 0 to print equals to print plus buzz.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so you can always start a new different if, right? Let's see. What I can't remember. Let's see. If I do stir, does that make it? Yeah. So that makes a number into a string, right? If to print stir x. This is not the best necessarily way to do this, but this is one option, right? So I think this will work. Let's see. If it doesn't, we'll have to debug it next time. What did I do wrong? Oh, wait. 1 second. Deep River, Connecticut. Oh, weird. Hello? 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 Okay, sorry. I was just afraid it was about the meeting coming up or I wouldn't have answered. All right.
Yeah. Totally.
So, all right. So, turns out, let's see.
Wait, you just need to call them back.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Because I thought that's something you could do. All right, so let's run that. Hey, look, it also seems like it works, right? So I don't know that it's any shorter than the other solutions, but it is kind of like, in fact, it's a little longer.
Could you make it one line shorter just by saying print x instead of making it a string, printing a string?
So you could say like print x here.
Yeah.
Let's comment it and leave it. Oh, wait, sorry. Hash, right. Too many languages. So let's try that. So yes, it's just going to cause an empty line to print also because printing a blank. So printing always
I mean, and then delete the last line.
delete. Well, but then when is it going to print FizzBuzz?
But I mean, if
Oh,
the conditions haven't been met.
So now you could say this, right? So that'll be right again. But then we've gotten back the line that we saved by, you know what I mean? Same number of lines of code, I think, as before.
Why do you need those last two lines?
Yeah, he needs to take out from.
I just think print x should be the
Because
last
it
line.
won't,
Well, it's not going to print it then, right? It's just going to print the numbers. Yeah, because we got to print what we got to print our fizzes and or buzzes.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, there's a bunch of different ways to do FizzBuzz. Actually, the most efficient way to do it, Python is not super well equipped to do, at least with what we know so far. We can talk a little bit more about this next time. So next time, Pi Day. If anybody wants to bring in Pi, feel free to bring in Pi. I will try to bring in Pi, but we'll see if I get around to that instead of cookies.